Turn the radio up using podcasts in the classroom, presented by Kristin, Robair, and Ms. Bonnie Chelette. Objectives. In this session, teachers will learn how to define podcasts, describe the importance of podcasts in the classroom, demonstrate how to implement podcast learning in the classroom, explore classroom benefits and how to implement in the classroom, and conduct a walkthrough of how to use podcasts in the Tier 1 curriculum. Introduction to podcasts. So, what are podcasts exactly? You may have heard of this term. However, in a little bit more detail, a podcast is a series of spoken word audio episodes all focused on a particular topic or theme, like cycling or startups. You can subscribe to the show with an app on your phone and listen to episodes whenever you like on your headphones, in the car, or through the speakers. You can also listen to episodes whenever you like, as well as through a virtual platform. And in the field of education, there are many topics that speakers discuss in a dialogue format. So for me, before I come to work in the morning, I listen to podcasts, Rick Warren podcasts. And so one of the things I like about the podcast is that it's a brief, maybe 10 to 15 minute motivational talk or motivational word. And once I'm finished with it, it's automatically deleted. Or if I want to save that message to play it again, I can save it to my phone. How does this make connections to 21st century learning and global education? So, as technology advances, we as an educational team have to catch up with what students need. And so one of the things that we know about podcasts is that it can create informed citizens, right? So currently our world focuses on so many different things that happen as it relates to news clippings or fake news as they hear. And they hear a lot of these news articles or news media reports on social media, through the regular news, as well as possibly reading like magazines or newspapers, right? And so listening to podcasts gives them that credible information that helps students engage with the world around them. It also exposes them to current events, which helps to encourage empathy. So this gives them a little insight about different perspectives that take place around the world, as well as cultural relevant stories. These are stories or events that students can connect to. So by implementing podcasts, students can practice speaking and listening skills through defined vocabulary, organizing ideas, and using transcripts to guide or target reading goals. Some examples of podcast topics are STEM, mathematics, social justice, financial literacy, humanities AMP, National Geographic, speeches, reports, audio diaries, interviews with community and national members. As teachers, there are some things that's geared toward educators, such as Bell Ringers. That's an actual name of a podcast that talks about strictly bell ringers, openings, hooks, pop culture and pedagogy, writing across the curriculum, project-based learning, teaching math through a social justice lens, growth mindset, content-specific literacy, I apologize. So pretty much those podcast topics all consist of some type of digital literacy, human rights, race and equity, peace education, community engagement, and media awareness. Are there any questions at this point about podcasts or podcast topics? There are so many different podcast topics, from gardening to how to create things. So you can use podcasts across the content, not just in English, but other contents such as science, social studies, math, agriculture, engineering. All right, when we talk about examples of classroom implementation, I have provided 3 examples of whole group practice, small group practice, as well as independent practice that you guys could use in your classroom. So the first example we're going to start with is the whole group practice, the Do Now Bell Ringer. Once a week, you can open class with a current event. You can have students listen to the story or the podcast and then answer the listening comprehension questions. I have provided an example for you, and I'm going to give you an example of something that I used in my classroom as well. So when we read the text of Franklin D. Roosevelt's For Freedom speech, one of the things that we did prior to reading the speech was we listened to a fireside chat podcast prior to reading the speech. That gave the students background information on who FDR was, why he was important to U.S. history, and why his presidency was considered one of the most impactful presidencies in United States history, right? And so what happened was this particular podcast activated that prior knowledge that was needed in order for the students to understand the purpose of FDR's For Freedom speech prior to going to war. And so the kids got the opportunity to listen on their own and answer the comprehension questions independently. Also, I used it in a manner of a closure activity as well. So we also read another speech from the speech at United Nations with a young girl named Malala who was shot in the head due to her protesting and advocacy for young girls and women to have education in the Middle East. And so what the students did was, after we read the speech, we listened to a podcast that took place maybe 3 years after that gave us an update on what Malala does now and how her initial speech impacts government policies in the Middle East. And so what the kids did was, after they listened to the podcast, I posted a question on Google Jamboard. So once they finished listening, the students had to respond to me through Google Jamboard as a closure activity. And so what this was a quick check for understanding to see what did the students learn? How were they able to connect the ideas from the speech to the podcast? So again, you can use podcasts in a multiple ways of a bell ringer to activate prior knowledge or as a closure to make connections between ideas. When we're talking about small group practice, think, pair, share. Think, pair, shares are one of my favorite things to do in the classroom because it's a simple yet engaging way for students to have that dialogue with each other to deepen their understanding in their thinking, right? And so one of the things that I use is the LDOE conversation stems, as well as a discussion tracker to just make sure that the students are having that dialogue. I know as teachers, many times we sit in PDs and they ask us to get buttons or get trinkets or candy, and however many you select, when you break out in your small groups, that's how many times you can talk, right? And so we as teachers, when we're in these PDs, it gives other people an opportunity to say something, whereas a person like me who may talk a lot, enough time to kind of limit my conversations and say something that's very impactful or powerful. And so what typically happens is that when you are having those types of dialogue take place in the small group setting, think, pair, shares are the best things in sliced bread. So when I would have one example of how I use the think, pair, share was when my students, we recently did the John F. Kennedy speech as well, his inaugural speech. And so what happened was, after we read the speech, we listened to a podcast that focused on John F. Kennedy's presidency, as well as a little bit about his personal life, how his personal life really took more media coverage than his professional life. And so the students were able to make those connections basically between the text as well as the podcast. The kids had to use the discussion tracker just to make sure that they are holding each other accountable, but they also had to use the conversation stems. So in order to speak, they started off with the conversation stems, and then they would track each other to see how many of them use the stems. But then, of course, they would write their answers in a graphic organizer. So it may be text analysis questions that you provide. It may be the listening comprehension questions that you can come up with. So that's one way that you can do think, pair, shares using podcasts. And again, I provided another example for you. Finally, the last thing would be independent practice. So when we're talking about student choice with 5 W's, you We know as teachers that our students struggle with informational text. So from grades 3 through 12, we find that our students struggle with identifying the main idea and summarizing by focusing on key events of who, what, where, when, and why something happened, right? And so one way that I was able to implement the 5 W's of journalism, my students, we read a informational text that focused on the brain, the impact of the brain in memory. Why it was in a unit 1 of my perspectives, basically focusing on why the brain is able to save more horrifying events rather than happy events. And so what the students had to do, they had to pretty much read the article and summarize what happened using the 5 W's of journalism. And then I took it a step further after they read the text. I had the students listen to a podcast that focused on the brain waves as well as their memory, the brain waves and how it impacts memory. And so as they listened to the podcast, they had to summarize what was said in the podcast, right? And then I had them take it a step further and use integrate tech integration tools such as Loom, such as Flipgrid. Even if students wanted to create a Nearpod, students actually use their cell phones, and they actually did a quote unquote news report for me. They pretended like they were a news journalist or news anchor, and they recited it to me. So not only did they focus on their listening skills by writing out the summary, they actually focused on they actually were able to execute their speaking skills by recording themselves talking to me and giving that news report to me. So that's another way that you can implement student choice, the 5 W's for independent practice. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Classroom benefits of usage. So again, you can use it as an engagement hook. It's beneficial because students can use this tool to help with activating prior knowledge, developing student background on a topic, or address any learning gaps. Current events routine. You can implement this once a week so students can make connections to events in history as well as their lives. Number 3, classroom debates or persuasive essays. Students can use this tool to present sides of an argument or use as the content in a persuasive essay. We know that prior to us doing argumentative writing, students like to talk about those same argumentative or debative topics when it comes to school, such as school lunch. We should be able to eat anything we want. Cell phones, they should be able to be on campus. Uniforms, we should be able to wear what we want. Voting, we should be able to vote, change the age of voting. We should be able to drive when we want. And a driving, what is it? Age. So with those topics, when you're debating, you can have students listen to podcasts that talk about argumentative topics and pick out pieces of evidence to support it and actually use it in a persuasive essay. Family and community engagement. Students can use this tool to discuss world issues with family and friends. So as you know, we live in a diverse world, a diverse community. So they can listen to different topics of interest and discuss different issues with family and friends, either in the classroom or at home, and build that community support. Cross-curricular instruction. This is one of my favorite things to do. Teachers can use this tool to reinforce close listening and comprehension related to a topic within other content. So what I would do, I would get with the biology teacher or get with the history teacher to see what topics they're covering and see if I can pull a podcast that's related to my text that I'm teaching and integrate those topics that way. And finally, speaking and listening skills. Students can use this tool to focus on a speaker with clarity and engaging with peers through collaborative discussion. So as you know, as a teacher, a lot of times it's hard for us to get to reach those speaking and listening skills and hit those standards. But by using podcasts along with the LDOE conversation stems, as well as a graphic organizer with the text analysis or listening comprehension questions and discussion tracker, you can basically be able to implement and hit these standards. Are there any questions so far about the classroom benefits of usage? Okay, moving on. Using podcasts in Tier 1 curriculum. So in our Tier 1 curriculum, those of you teachers that uses the My Perspectives platform, it offers the use of podcasts through ListenWise in connection with NPR, and the podcasts are aligned content based upon the units. Each podcast has a listening link that can be linked and assigned via Google Classroom, listening comprehension questions, and classroom discussion themes. So the steps for accessibility. Right now, we're going to go through those steps just to make sure that I can walk you through it. And of course, you guys have the steps typed here. So let's see where we're going to go. Okay, so the first step, you're going to log in, which is obvious, sign in. And then from there, where your home screen pops up, you're going to go to browse or wherever your texts are located. Oh, let me see. Browse all 10 programs. And so because I was a 10th grade teacher, I'm going to go to 10th grade. And here you're going to see the table of contents listed, all of these cool little features. But you want to click here where it says teacher resources. And where you see teacher resources, you're going to click on a link that says current events. It's going to ask you to go to a new window. You just press OK. And it's going to bring you to this home screen. So if you notice with the 10th grade curriculum, each unit is already outlined. And in the unit, I'll go to unit 3 because it has new content listed there. There are examples of the podcast. So one of the stories, the short stories that's listed in the small group learning talks about Malaya Yousafzai, who was a Pakistani girl shot for going to school. And so in the particular My Perspectives task, one of the things you could do is you can open up your lesson with this particular podcast and you share the link with students through Google Classroom, and you can assign a listening comprehension question or classroom discussion themes. You can assign either one of these as like a discussion board question, or if you want to, again, have the students work in a small group to do that particular activity. So this could be used as a bell ringer or a closure, or even as a think, pair, share once the reading has completed and you're focusing on those skills such as main idea or making connections to the text. And so as you can see, you also have different current events if you didn't want to focus on the units. And it's no more than 5 minutes, no less than 20 seconds. And as you can see, it's dated. So for my science teachers that's in here, we talk about water on the moon. That's something that students can listen to or make connections with. My tech teachers that's on the call, there was an article, a podcast, I'm sorry, that was talking about broadband, because at this point they can make that connection that technology is everywhere. So here's another example of a podcast that can be used. Social studies, anniversary of Pearl Harbor, my humanities teachers, pronouns for all. So as you can see, there are an array of topics that can be covered within the classroom that can also make connections through the text set of My Perspectives. And And for all intents and purposes, we can do a middle school grade level as well. My favorite grade level to teach in middle school was 7th grade. Love 7th grade. So shout out to my 7th grade teachers on the call. So again, click on current events, open a new window. And as you can see, it gives you that aligned content. Again, we'll talk with Unit 1 generations. And as you can see, it makes that real world connection with different podcasts that's presented to those texts that's in my perspectives. So in this slide set, we have hyperlinked some examples of podcasts to use in the classroom. So this is an abundance of resources that you can check out on your own time.
And just, I know, and you're
go ahead, Bonnie, I'm sorry.
And I didn't want to interrupt you. But these are some actual like teachers who use podcasts with their students. These specific examples, and these teachers only gave me permission to share this out. So you can see she does it in a few ways. She uses this, I believe, these are from NPR, and then like the Great Thanksgiving Listen. And like I said, she uses in the first where it says "This to Believe." If you click on that, it's got like her jam boards that she used. So feel free to like make copies of this. Like I said, I spoke to this teacher, and she knows where we're accessing it. Because that's sometimes for me, I feel like it helps if I can see how a teacher used it. This particular person was a high school English teacher. And not like at just like at a regular school. So so she used it, like I said, this is like her slide deck, this is her process, her jam board, and that kind of stuff. So I thought it might be helpful to see some examples. There's a lot of other stuff out there if you're interested. There's me and Ms. Robair kind of want to use this as one of our pet projects to build on. So if you do want to do this, like, do not hesitate to reach out to me. My name is in chat, but let's work on this. And if you're scared of the tech, I got you. Don't be scared of the tech at all. I can help you with that. So I'm gonna let Ms. Robair have it back, but I did want to say here are just some examples and I wanted to explain them. Sorry,
okay.
Kristin, you're doing a great job.
You're fine. Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Bonnie. So with that being said, I just wanted to click on, it's 8:54, let me hurry up. Okay, I just wanted to show you some examples. So this is an example of a Jamboard, which I love using as well. And so it gives those step-by-step assessments on step-by-step directions on how to complete certain assignments. So I got to click from tab to tab. And then an essay. So again, this particular teacher gives essay directions using the podcast, narrative statements and things of that nature, just to show. And last but not least, I want to say this is a choice board that she used. I love choice boards. I think they're a great way to differentiate instruction in the classroom. And so here, as you can see, students can take note-taking docs, and so they can take notes and they can click on the links and complete those activities. I know for my high school teachers who are implementing in the 9th grade freshman academies, those AVIDs, they can use those Cornell notes to take notes on podcasts as well. And so if there are any questions, please feel free to contact us. My name is Kristin Robair. You can email me at any time at krobair@ebrschools.org. You can follow me on Twitter at Miss K Robair. And Bonnie, you want to introduce and give your contact information?
Yes. She did do a great job. So right, I'm Bonnie Chelette. I'm a tech facilitator. I work with high schools, but I really like to work with everybody, especially about tech stuff. So you can reach me here, like I said, on Twitter. I know a lot of people who do this kind of stuff. So if you're teaching, a specific subject or something, and you want me to kind of like put some feelers out and see if anybody else is doing them similar, let me know and we can try to do that together. So access from my perspective, listen wise. Lamika, email me. I should be able to get that. So email me and we'll get you the listen wise stuff straight. I'll figure it out. But just
Okay.
email me your name and like your school and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Adrian. No problem. No problem.
Okay, guys, and before you leave, I was able to finally pull up the attendance document and evaluation tool. And if you guys, I'm going to drop that link in the chat. And if you guys would please complete that for me, it would be greatly appreciated. I just want to say, hey, am I on camera? Okay, hey y'all. I just want to say thank you all for coming to this podcast presentation. I really appreciate it. And again, if you guys have any questions or you need any assistance from myself or Bonnie, it'll be greatly appreciated if you just contact us via email, via Twitter, and we'll be here to help.